Well, I think it's always hard to generalize in entrepreneurship because every entrepreneur is different. But I think most of the really inspiring stories aren't so data-driven. They're more things people want to see in the world. Like, it's based on solving a big problem. It's looking around them and saying, why don't we have a better power grid? Why does it take, forever to build a house? Why don't we have, these things in our country? And people want them to exist. And, I actually think that most of the great entrepreneurs that I've covered in Silicon Valley, that's how they started companies. It wasn't because of data. I mean, I know this sounds like, oh my God, to say at this conference, but it wasn't because of data, it was because they wanted to build something and they believed in it. And in fact, in most cases, there actually was a lot of data to show it wasn't needed. I mean, no one thought we needed another search engine before Google, and there were so many things that Mark Zuckerberg did in building Facebook that were really contrary to what he was seeing in the data, but he kind of believed in this ultimate vision and sort of it very soon then backed it up. So, I always think about, there's a story where Steve Jobs was talking to a group of journalists and they asked, what did you see in market research that made you create, the iPad? And he was like, it's not consumers' job to tell me what they want. It's my job to dream something up for them. So I think that's the kind of innovation that you really see in these places. And that's what I look for as a reporter. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Silicon Valley and the West generally has proven that we don't understand the problems, and so we don't understand the solutions. I mean, the only companies that have done really well in places like China, like the more developed of the emerging markets, are luxury goods that a very small percentage, but a lot of those are European companies, and they're not necessarily American companies, they're just big, global luxury brands. Or like KFC has done an amazing job throughout Asia. But other than that, I mean, no Silicon Valley companies have really done a very good job at all. And, why is that? Because we don't understand their markets, and we're arrogant, and we don't know how to build for their markets. And, if we can't do it in China, a place that actually has pretty good infrastructure that we kind of can't understand, we're not going to do it in Central Africa. We're not even doing it in Brazil. We're not doing it in these other countries. So that's what's so exciting about this opportunity to me is the market forces are undeniably just massive. And it's undeniably where the most growth is going to come from. And I think you have to be really arrogant to think America is going to provide those solutions. So I'm not a big believer in clusters. I think Silicon Valley was an incredibly unique thing, and I think it's something that governments have spent billions of dollars trying to replicate, and no one's done it. So it's not just putting all this stuff in the same place that makes it happen. I mean, there's this issue of culture, there's this issue of need, there's funding, there's a willingness to take risk. There are all these things that a cluster doesn't really solve. So I think when you get all those ingredients together, frequently things tend to cluster, but I think the cluster is the after result and not the for result. And I think the place I saw this the most dramatically was in Bangalore, which everyone talks about as being this hub of every great tech mind of India is there. And I mean, I spent a couple months in India. I was in a lot of different cities. I met with hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs in Bangalore, and I can think of two that were really impressive. I met a lot of kids who worked for multinationals and were like, well, I'm going to take a year out and I'll start this, and if it doesn't become big, I'll get another job at a multinational. That's not entrepreneurship. So you had what should have been this great cluster and all of this energy and money and all the things, you could check off the boxes on paper, but that's not where I found the best entrepreneurs in India. Well, it's actually something I thought about a lot because it's a big issue in Silicon Valley too. I mean, in the United States now, there's more women getting degrees in higher education than men. There's almost gender parity at sort of the basic management level, but only 15 of our biggest 500 companies are run by women. So it's we have this huge problem we can't understand. And so, I think the hope is that some of these countries, the same way they're not repeating sort of ineffectual infrastructure we built years ago, that they're not sort of going back in time and putting in these glass ceilings that a lot of the Western world has put in. And to some cases that's a naive hope, in some cases it looks like actually a realistic hope. I mean, I think I spent 2 weeks with the United States State Department going around different parts of Indonesia talking about women entrepreneurship. And, you know, I'm this like pregnant American woman on stage talking about women entrepreneurship in the world's most Muslim country. I mean, you would like think people were like giving examples of Israel, like you think people were freaking out. But it's just not, it's not the way you would think it would be at all. And it's a very, very temperate Muslim country. And I met so many inspiring women entrepreneurs in really remote areas, and you know, they're not building the next Facebook, but they're building a company and they have 7 to 9 kids, and like they don't complain about the things we complain about in the West. They don't complain about work-life balance. Like they have bigger problems they're trying to deal with. So I think it's made me so much stronger as a working woman, being in the emerging world and seeing what women have to go through. And it's like, I was just in Nigeria last week, you know, and I'm doing all this like crazy stuff in Nigeria, and everyone in the US is like, what are you doing? You're pregnant, you can't even lift a bag. And everyone in Nigeria is like, doesn't bat an eyelash. I mean, it's actually made me like so much stronger. So I think it's one thing we can learn. But I think the most interesting country to watch is really China, because, you know, unlike India, unlike Indonesia, unlike Africa, unlike even Brazil, almost everyone who migrates to cities is going into the formal economy in China because the government makes them. Whereas everywhere else, people are kind of off the grid, living in slums, doing work under the table. And so what that means is you've had this massive migration of hundreds of millions of people to these cities, and they're taking factory jobs, which we don't think of as very empowering, but it's a way that women are getting into the workforce, and they're aggressively climbing the ladder and then getting office jobs and then getting education. And already in a really short period of time, China's gone from a place that didn't value female life to there's almost as many women entering college as men. And so that to me is the country to watch, because it's counterintuitive as hell, but there are different social structures being erected.